What truly happens the moment an empath stops suffering and finally chooses to heal? Not just emotionally, but spiritually, deep inside where the narcissist could never reach? Because something powerful begins in that moment, something the narcissist never sees coming. When an empath pulls their energy back, the universe shifts, timelines change, old patterns break, and the narcissist, who once felt untouchable, suddenly faces a spiritual downfall they can't explain. Today, we're diving into those unseen changes, the karmic effects, the energetic disconnect, and the surprising truth about why the narcissist feels the loss long before the empath even realizes their strength. Stay with me until the end, because the last point will make you see your entire journey with them differently. And if you've ever healed from someone who drained your soul, tell me in the comments. I choose healing now. Don't forget to subscribe if you're ready for more content that protects your spirit, strengthens your mind, and reminds you of who you truly are. The moment an empath decides to step into their own healing, something profound begins to shift, not just emotionally, but at a deep energetic level that even the narcissist cannot ignore. When the empath consciously pulls back from absorbing the chaos around them, their energy field, which may have once been porous and vulnerable to manipulation, begins to reset itself. It's as if a quiet internal switch is flipped, and suddenly the constant drain of emotions, criticisms, and projections no longer pierces their aura. Instead of taking in negativity and allowing it to shape their day, their thoughts, or their very sense of self, they start radiating a calm, stable energy that draws in clarity and strength. This is not a superficial change. It is a deep, spiritual realignment. The empath begins to feel grounded in a way they never have before, like a tree whose roots suddenly sink into solid, nourishing soil after years of being uprooted. And the narcissist, who has grown accustomed to feeding off this energy, instantly senses the disconnect. They feel it in subtle ways at first: a pause in the usual emotional chaos, a lack of tension to exploit, a sudden absence of vulnerability that they once relied upon. Gradually, it becomes impossible for them to ignore, as though the very frequency of the empath's being has shifted beyond the reach of manipulation. What follows is not just a loss for the narcissist in terms of control, but a complete disruption of their expectations. They have spent so long assuming that the empath will absorb their drama, their anger, their need for validation, that when the empath finally steps back and protects their energy, it is disorienting. They feel an unfamiliar emptiness, a quiet space where before there was constant access. Meanwhile, the empath experiences something entirely new: freedom within their own energy. Without the constant absorption of external negativity, they begin to feel lighter, more present, and more in control of their own reality. Their mind clears, their intuition sharpens, and they find themselves able to act from a place of power rather than reaction. The energy reset is transformative because it marks the beginning of a cycle that cannot be reversed by manipulation or guilt. It is a profound reminder that the empath's power was never in enduring pain for someone else, but in reclaiming their own energy and boundaries. And as their aura strengthens and their vibration rises, the narcissist is left facing a reality they cannot control, one in which the empath exists fully in their own light, untouchable, and entirely aligned with their inner truth. When an empath finally decides to stop pouring their emotional energy into someone who never truly valued them, the effects on the narcissist are immediate, subtle, and profoundly destabilizing. The narcissist has relied for so long on the constant flow of attention, validation, and emotional support to maintain the illusion of their invincibility. This energy was never just casual. It was the fuel for their ego, the mirror that reflected back the image of someone important, admired, and untouchable. Once the empath consciously pulls back, however, that reflection shatters. Suddenly, they are faced with an emptiness they cannot fill themselves. The emotional void feels unnatural and even frightening because it exposes the truth they have been hiding from. The persona they have built so carefully is dependent on someone else's energy to survive. Spiritually, It is as if the narcissist encounters a vacuum in their soul, a silent space where there once was constant affirmation and manipulation. They begin to feel the absence in ways that words cannot fully capture. The lack of control, the lack of influence, the lack of admiration. Every tactic that once worked, the charm, the guilt, the blame, the anger, now falls flat because the empath is no longer available to feed into it. This is not just an emotional loss, it is a spiritual one. The narcissist realizes, consciously or unconsciously, that their sense of self, their identity, and even their perceived power were never self-generated. They depended entirely on the empathy, attention, and emotional labor of another. And when that support is removed, it is not just inconvenient, it is destabilizing. They feel exposed, raw, and incomplete, as though a crucial part of their world has disappeared. This ego void can trigger confusion, frustration, and even obsessive thinking, as the narcissist scrambles to regain control or attempt to fill the emptiness with new sources of validation, often unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, the empath, who has reclaimed their energy, experiences the opposite. They feel grounded, empowered, and whole, radiating strength without needing to appease or rescue anyone. The stark contrast is almost palpable. The narcissist spirals inward, feeling the absence of what they once exploited, while the empath rises in clarity and stability. In essence, the narcissist experiences an ego void because they are confronted with the undeniable truth that their identity was never entirely theirs. It depended on the energy, attention, and emotional labor of someone who has now chosen to protect themselves. And in that moment, the narcissist faces a spiritual emptiness they cannot manipulate away, a quiet reflection of the reality they have long avoided, that the empath's energy is no longer theirs to control. When an empath makes the conscious decision to step fully into their healing, the universe begins to respond in ways that may seem invisible at first but are profoundly powerful. One of the most remarkable shifts is the formation of a spiritual shield around them, an energetic boundary that protects their mind, body, and soul from the manipulations, intrusions, and emotional chaos of the narcissist. This is not just a metaphor, it is a realignment of energies. As the empath's vibration rises through self-awareness, self-care, and emotional release, the protective shield strengthens, creating a kind of invisible barrier that the narcissist can no longer penetrate. Suddenly, old tactics that once worked, guilt, blame, anger, charm, lose their potency. The narcissist finds themselves unable to manipulate, provoke, or draw the empath back into patterns of control because the energy they once relied upon is no longer available. Beyond this energetic shield, karmic forces begin to align in subtle but undeniable ways. The old cycle of emotional exploitation starts to close, as if the universe itself is saying that this chapter has ended and will not be reopened. Doors that once allowed the narcissist access to the empath's energy, attention, or trust begin to shut automatically, often without the empath even having to enforce them. It is as though a higher intelligence is at work, creating barriers and protections that human effort alone could not achieve. The empath may notice that attempts by the narcissist to re-enter their life feel awkward, strained, or ineffective. Sometimes these attempts fizzle out almost instantly, leaving the narcissist confused and frustrated, while the empath remains unaffected, calm, and grounded. This universal protection allows the empath not only to reclaim their energy but also to heal at a pace that feels natural and safe. They can now focus on themselves, their growth, and their spiritual alignment without fear of regression. And while the narcissist struggles to regain a foothold, they are confronted with the undeniable truth that the empath has evolved beyond their control. The protection is not punitive, it is restorative. It safeguards the empath's progress and ensures that their energy, which may have once been freely taken and manipulated, is now theirs alone. This shift is a clear sign that the universe supports the empath's journey, that healing is not only possible but guaranteed when boundaries are respected and energy is consciously reclaimed. In this sacred space, the empath begins to experience freedom, inner peace, and a renewed sense of purpose, while the narcissist faces the reality that their influence has been permanently limited. The formation of this spiritual shield is a pivotal moment, marking the end of old cycles and the start of a life where the empath is fully aligned, energetically protected, and spiritually empowered. When an empath finally begins to heal, a quiet but powerful transformation unfolds, one that the narcissist never anticipates. Energetically, the empath becomes unreachable. It's not about ignoring messages or refusing to pick up calls. It's much deeper than that. Their vibration rises, their inner world stabilizes, and they step out of the emotional frequency where manipulation can survive. Suddenly, the old tactics that once held so much power, guilt trips, pity plays, love bombing, silent treatments, emotional storms, collapse in front of them like faded illusions. The empath no longer reacts with the same sensitivity or confusion. They no longer carry the weight of someone else's emotional chaos on their shoulders. They see the manipulation clearly, not because they became cold, but because they became conscious. And that shift alone breaks the entire cycle. For the narcissist, this change is deeply unsettling. They are used to pressing emotional buttons and getting immediate reactions, tears, explanations, apologies, self-doubt, or frantic attempts to fix what was never the empath's fault. They're used to a predictable outcome, control. But healing disconnects those emotional wires. The empath's nervous system no longer responds to the narcissist's triggers. Their heart no longer breaks from the same insults. Their mind no longer twists itself trying to understand someone who never intended to be understood. The narcissist begins testing every familiar method, almost like flipping through an old playbook that suddenly feels outdated. They may try guilt, reminding the empath of everything they did for them, but it falls flat. They may try pity, painting themselves as a victim who desperately needs help, but the empath sees through the performance. They may try love bombing, grand gestures, sudden softness, intense promises. But the empath no longer feels pulled in by emotional extremes that once clouded their judgment. Instead, they stand grounded, observing from a place of clarity. This is the moment the narcissist realizes the shift is not temporary, it is transformation. The empath they once controlled with ease is no longer energetically available to be manipulated. Their spirit has grown stronger, their boundaries are sharper, and their intuition is louder than ever. What the narcissist once read as weakness is now wisdom. What they mistook as dependence has become self-awareness. And the more the empath rises, the more invisible the manipulation becomes. This new level of consciousness is something the narcissist cannot access or imitate because it does not come from strategy, it comes from healing. It comes from choosing oneself after years of choosing someone else. It comes from finally understanding that love should not demand suffering. As the empath steps into this higher vibration, the narcissist finds themselves locked out of a world they used to control. The connection that once served their ego now becomes a reminder of everything they can no longer influence. And in that moment, the narcissist loses not just access, but power. The empath has outgrown the frequency of manipulation, and no tactic can reach someone who has risen into their true, authentic self. When the empath finally chooses to heal, a profound transformation begins to unfold, one that reaches far beyond the surface of emotions and relationships. It is as if the universe itself begins to reorganize around them, clearing away distractions, misalignments, and anything that no longer serves their higher purpose. The moment they reclaim their energy, their life path begins to realign with their original spiritual mission, the calling they may have lost sight of while giving so much of themselves to others, especially to those who never truly valued them. This realignment is subtle at first, like a soft current guiding a ship back to shore, but over time, it becomes undeniable. The empath begins to notice opportunities opening up in ways that feel almost orchestrated by a higher intelligence. Doors that were once closed start to swing wide. Paths that seemed blocked become accessible, and the clarity that had been clouded by emotional chaos and manipulation returns in full force. They begin to recognize situations, people, and choices that align with their growth rather than detract from it, and their inner strength solidifies with each decision that honors their boundaries, their heart, and their soul. This shift, however, is not just a personal awakening. It is something the narcissist feels immediately. For years, the narcissist has assumed that the empath will remain pliable, available, and dependent on their attention and approval. They expect the same old patterns to continue, the same predictable energy to feed their ego, and the same brokenness that allowed them to maintain control. But when the empath steps into their own power, this expectation is shattered. The narcissist is confronted with a reality they did not anticipate. The empath is no longer the person they could manipulate. Their carefully constructed system of control begins to crumble because the empath has started walking a different path, a path that honors their growth, wisdom, and purpose. The shock the narcissist experiences is not only psychological but also spiritual, because they can sense the shift in vibration. The empath's energy has risen beyond the reach of their manipulation, and it is in this elevated state that true alignment begins. The realignment of the empath's life path brings with it more than just external opportunities. It sparks an internal renaissance. They begin to recognize their talents, gifts, and passions that may have been suppressed while trying to meet the needs of someone who never truly appreciated them. Creative ideas flow more freely. Connections with people who uplift and inspire them appear more naturally. The empath feels a growing sense of purpose in even the smallest actions, as though every choice is guided by an invisible hand leading them closer to the life they were always meant to live. Their intuition sharpens, allowing them to navigate situations with confidence, wisdom, and discernment that would have been impossible while entangled in old cycles of manipulation. They start making decisions not out of fear, guilt, or obligation, but out of clarity, love for themselves, and alignment with their higher self. This transformation is deeply empowering, and it fundamentally alters the dynamics between the empath and the narcissist. The narcissist, accustomed to predictability and control, is left bewildered. They may attempt to re-enter the empath's life, to test the boundaries, or to regain the power they once held, but they find that nothing works as it did before. The empath's focus has shifted inward, their energy no longer available to be exploited, and their sense of purpose is firmly rooted in their own growth. This new direction is not a reaction to the narcissist but a proactive, conscious choice to live authentically, fully, and spiritually aligned. The narcissist experiences this as a loss of influence, a void where they once thrived on the empath's emotional labor. And while the narcissist may scramble to regain control, they find themselves incapable of reaching a soul that has already stepped into its true path. As the empath's life begins to realign, the ripple effects extend far beyond the personal level. Their energy, now clearer and stronger, influences the people, opportunities, and environments around them in positive ways. Relationships that were once draining or toxic fade naturally, replaced by connections that nurture growth, respect, and mutual understanding. They attract mentors, collaborators, and companions who resonate with their purpose, and doors open in their career, creative pursuits, and spiritual journey that may have seemed impossible before. This alignment also brings an inner peace that had been absent for years, a sense of harmony between who they are, what they want, and the direction their life is taking. Ultimately, the realignment of the empath's life path is a powerful declaration of self-empowerment. It signals the end of old cycles of dependence, emotional exploitation, and manipulation. It demonstrates that the empath is no longer defined by the expectations or control of others but by their own values, intuition, and divine guidance. Every step they take in alignment strengthens their spiritual foundation, reinforces their boundaries, and ensures that the narcissist's influence continues to diminish. The empath emerges not only healed but transformed, walking with purpose, radiating clarity, and living fully in accordance with the life they were always meant to lead. In this sacred process, The universe conspires in their favor, opportunities manifest in alignment with their growth, and the narcissist is left witnessing a profound shift that they can neither stop nor control. The empath's journey becomes a testament to the power of reclaiming one's energy, embracing personal evolution, and walking unwaveringly on the path of true self-realization. When an empath finally decides to stop giving their energy to someone who thrives on control and manipulation, the effect on the narcissist is immediate, profound, and often devastating, far beyond anything that can be perceived on a surface level. It's important to understand that what the narcissist loses is not merely emotional attention or validation. It is a much deeper, spiritual supply that they have long depended upon without consciously acknowledging it. For years, the empath has unknowingly been the lifeline to the narcissist's ego, the quiet source of energy that propels their self-image and sense of control. Every reaction, every compromise, every ounce of attention, and every moment of concern has fed the narcissist's internal world, making them feel powerful, untouchable, and perpetually in command. This supply sustains not only their confidence but also their illusion of stability and identity. When the empath pulls back, even gradually, the narcissist's world begins to tremble in ways they cannot manage or predict. The absence is like removing a crucial structural support from a building. Suddenly, everything they once relied upon to feel grounded begins to collapse. On the surface, they may appear unaffected or indifferent, but internally, there is a profound instability that begins to creep in. Paranoia takes root as the narcissist starts obsessing over the reasons for this loss, trying to understand what went wrong and how to reclaim the energy that was so freely available before. They experience a creeping fear of abandonment, an unease that grows louder with every moment the empath remains emotionally and spiritually independent. This is because their sense of self has always been intricately linked to the energy they extract from others. Without it, they confront a hollow version of themselves, one that is forced to face the reality that they cannot generate the same vitality on their own. The spiritual implications of this loss are equally significant. The narcissist has long existed in a symbiotic relationship with the empath, drawing strength, validation, and a sense of purpose from someone else's presence. When the empath steps away, that symbiosis is severed. The narcissist is suddenly confronted with a void that cannot be filled with charm, manipulation, or superficial connections. Their spiritual fuel has been cut off, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable in ways they have rarely, if ever, experienced. The absence of the empath's energy does more than create emotional discomfort. It shakes the foundations of their identity, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable truth that the control and power they so desperately cling to are illusions dependent on another person's generosity and compassion. This loss triggers a cascade of behavioral responses. The narcissist may begin to obsessively monitor the empath, seeking to understand what has changed and how they might regain access to this vital source of energy. They may attempt to re-enter the empath's life through manipulation, charm, guilt, or even aggression, but these tactics often fail against an empath who has fully reclaimed their boundaries. With every failed attempt, the narcissist experiences heightened anxiety, frustration, and confusion. They feel trapped in a world where their usual methods of influence no longer yield results. Their previously stable sense of power is replaced by inner turmoil, as the absence of the empath exposes the fragility of their ego and the dependency they have always denied. The empath, on the other hand, experiences a completely different reality. With the narcissist's energy no longer required to maintain balance or stability, the empath's life begins to expand in ways previously unimaginable. They gain clarity, freedom, and the ability to focus on personal growth, spiritual alignment, and authentic connections. This freedom highlights the stark contrast between the empath's newfound stability and the narcissist's disintegration. The very presence of the narcissist, once so consuming, becomes irrelevant to the empath, who now thrives independently, radiating energy, confidence, and peace. For the narcissist, This loss of energetic supply is not a temporary inconvenience. It is a profound existential disruption. They are forced to confront the fact that their internal world, their sense of self, and their perceived invincibility were sustained largely by someone else's willingness to give, care, and endure. Without the empath's energy, they are left exposed, vulnerable, and often desperate, facing a spiritual emptiness that cannot be filled by manipulation, charm, or control. This is the moment when the narcissist realizes that the empath's departure is permanent, and the stability, power, and certainty they once assumed they could always command are gone. Ultimately, the empath's decision to withdraw their energy creates a powerful shift in the dynamic, one that is both liberating for the empath and destabilizing for the narcissist. It marks the end of a cycle of dependence, manipulation, and control, and initiates a new era where the empath is free to walk their own path, aligned with purpose, intuition, and inner strength. Meanwhile, the narcissist is left to face the consequences of their reliance on external energy, forced to confront the emptiness that comes from losing a vital source of spiritual sustenance. In this profound shift, the empath emerges empowered, whole, and energetically sovereign, while the narcissist is reminded that the power they once held was never truly theirs to begin with. When an empath finally begins healing, a remarkable transformation unfolds, quiet, gentle, but incredibly powerful. This shift doesn't just happen inside them. It radiates outward, reshaping the world they attract and the people who step into it. As their energy field becomes clearer, steadier, and less entangled in chaos, the universe responds immediately. It begins aligning them with higher vibrational connections, people who support their growth, honor their boundaries, and love them without draining their spirit. After spending years entangled with a narcissist, where giving was constant and receiving was rare, this sudden arrival of healthier relationships feels almost unreal at first. But it is the natural consequence of choosing healing. When the empath rises, their vibration rises with them, and that higher frequency acts like a beacon, calling in new people and experiences that match their elevated state. These new connections come in many forms: genuine friendships, mentors who speak wisdom into their lives, soul-aligned partners, supportive communities, and intuitive guides who help them rediscover their purpose. Instead of relationships filled with emotional confusion, these new bonds feel calm, stable, and deeply nourishing. There is no walking on eggshells, no fear of being misunderstood, no pressure to prove their worth. The empath begins to attract people who see their value immediately, who feel honored by their presence rather than threatened by their empathy. This creates a profound emotional shift. For the first time in a long time, the empath realizes that love should feel safe, not heavy. Support should feel natural, not earned through suffering. And connection should uplift, not deplete. As these higher vibrational connections form, the empath's life path expands in ways they never anticipated. Opportunities appear where there were once dead ends. Inspiration returns where exhaustion once lived. New friendships carry healing conversations. New romantic interests offer sincere affection, not manipulation. Even strangers seem to show up at the right time with guidance or encouragement. This is because the empath is finally aligned with people who match their heart, people who don't fear vulnerability, compassion, or emotional honesty. The universe always mirrors our energy, and once the empath stops carrying emotional weight that isn't theirs, what comes back to them is clarity, not confusion, expansion, not contraction, blessings, not burdens. Meanwhile, on the other side of this transformation, the narcissist senses the shift long before they understand it logically. Narcissists operate on energetic instincts. They can feel when their former supply no longer vibrates at a frequency they can exploit. And when the empath's vibration rises, the narcissist feels spiritually threatened in a very real way. They may not call it energy or vibration, but they sense the loss of influence. They sense the empath slipping away into a life where their presence is irrelevant. This spiritual threat triggers a deep, uncomfortable fear within the narcissist, the fear of being replaced. Of course, the narcissist never admits this fear, even to themselves. Instead, they may become restless, irritable, or suddenly obsessed with the empath's life. They may attempt to re-establish contact through subtle messages, old memories, fake concern, or dramatic apologies. But beneath all of it lies one driving panic. The empath is finding people who can give them what the narcissist never could. And that reality terrifies them. Because deep down, narcissists know they don't offer the level of love, care, and authenticity that higher vibrational individuals do. They know they cannot compete with a relationship built on respect, growth, and emotional safety. The narcissist fears something even deeper than being replaced. They fear being forgotten. The empath's rising vibration pulls them into a future where the narcissist becomes a distant memory instead of a central figure. And nothing wounds a narcissist more than irrelevance. They depend on feeling significant, even through toxic means. Losing the empath to healthier connections exposes their greatest insecurity. Without control, they have no place in the empath's life, and without the empath's energy, they have no sense of identity. But for the empath, this shift is not about replacement. It is about elevation. It is about stepping into relationships that reflect who they truly are, rather than relationships that force them to shrink. Higher vibrational connections don't replace old wounds. They heal them. They show the empath what genuine care looks like. They remind them that their empathy is a strength, not a weakness. And they teach them that love doesn't require sacrifice of the soul. In these new relationships, the empath grows. They learn to receive without guilt. They learn to speak their truth without fear. They learn to trust again, but this time, wisely, from intuition rather than longing. Every new connection becomes a mirror that reflects their worth back to them, helping them rebuild their self-image after years of being told they were too sensitive, too emotional, or too much. And as the empath strengthens, something magical happens. Their heart becomes open again, not to chaos, but to genuine love. Their mind becomes clear, not for survival, but for vision. Their life becomes aligned, not with someone's demands, but with their soul's direction. These new higher vibrational people don't just enter their life. They fit in their life, naturally and effortlessly, because they match the empath's healed energy. This is the true victory of the empath's journey. Not revenge. Not proving anything. But rising so high that they attract a world the narcissist can never follow them into. A world built on peace, truth, and emotional safety. A world where the empath is not drained, but celebrated. A world where their soul finally feels at home. When an empath finally steps into their healing, the ripple effects extend far beyond their personal boundaries or immediate relationships. One of the most profound shifts that occurs during this journey is the unfolding of karmic balance. Karmic balance is often misunderstood as revenge or retribution, but in reality, it is the natural law of alignment working in its quiet, invisible way. The universe does not act out of anger or punishment. It simply restores harmony by ensuring that every energy given, taken, or misused finds its rightful place. For the empath, this means a profound sense of justice without effort, a restoration of the peace and stability that was long denied, and a return to the natural flow of life that had been obstructed by manipulation, deceit, and emotional exploitation. For the narcissist, the consequences are unavoidable. The chaos, confusion, and pain they projected onto the empath begin to mirror back into their own life, not as punishment, but as the universe aligning energies according to truth and balance. The process is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grows increasingly undeniable over time. The narcissist may find themselves encountering situations where their usual tactics no longer yield control. People around them may respond differently, conflicts may escalate without resolution, and their carefully constructed image of dominance begins to fracture. Every lie, manipulation, and act of exploitation that once served to maintain their sense of power begins to boomerang, creating a series of consequences that feel disorienting and unavoidable. The narcissist may experience professional setbacks, strained personal relationships, or unexpected confrontations that expose their true nature. These outcomes are not orchestrated by anyone's desire for revenge. They are simply the universe realigning energies according to principles of truth and balance. This is the natural law in action. What is sown will inevitably manifest, and what is taken will eventually be returned in a form that restores equilibrium. Meanwhile, the empath experiences the opposite of this turbulence. As the narcissist begins to confront the consequences of their actions, the empath's life starts to settle into a rhythm of peace, clarity, and empowerment. The energy that was once consumed by emotional labor or manipulation is now redirected towards self-growth, spiritual alignment, and meaningful connections. The empath feels a sense of relief that is deeper than any external recognition, an internal acknowledgement that they have survived, reclaimed their boundaries, and stepped fully into their own power. Every moment of suffering they endured for the sake of someone else's control now serves as a catalyst for wisdom, resilience, and intuitive strength. Their journey toward healing activates a flow of energy that aligns circumstances, people, and opportunities with their highest good. Karmic balance also acts as a mirror of truth, reflecting back to the narcissist the patterns they have long relied upon. For someone who has manipulated, deceived, or exploited others, this reflection can be jarring. They are forced to face a reality where their charm, control, and influence are no longer effective, and where the very strategies that maintain their sense of superiority now fail them completely. The universe does not orchestrate these situations to punish. Rather, it allows the natural consequences of their behavior to surface in a way that encourages awareness and, potentially, growth. The chaos the narcissist experiences is the manifestation of the imbalance they created in the lives of others, particularly the empath who once carried their emotional weight. It is a gentle, yet undeniable, unfolding of truth that demonstrates the universality of cause and effect. For the empath, witnessing this karmic realignment is transformative. It validates their experiences without requiring confrontation, vindication, or revenge. They are able to observe the unraveling of manipulative dynamics while remaining untouched and unreactive because their energy is no longer tethered to outcomes that do not serve their well-being. This distance, achieved through healing and energy reclamation, allows them to maintain peace even as the universe restores balance elsewhere. It is a subtle, empowering experience. The empath begins to understand that the power they once attributed to the narcissist was never real. It was simply energy that they allowed to be misdirected. Once reclaimed, that energy naturally flows back into alignment, supporting the empath's life while correcting the distortions caused by the narcissist's actions. Karmic balance is also deeply spiritual. It demonstrates that the universe has its own mechanisms for justice and restoration, which do not require human intervention or conscious effort. For the empath, this is a profound reassurance. They are not responsible for enacting consequences or ensuring fairness. Their role is simply to heal, reclaim their energy, and act in alignment with their truth. In doing so, they naturally invite circumstances, people, and events that support their highest good. Meanwhile, the narcissist encounters obstacles, disruptions, and disconnection that reflect the imbalance they once created, providing an inevitable, experiential lesson that no amount of manipulation or charm can override. Ultimately, the unfolding of karmic balance marks a turning point in the empath's journey. It validates their decision to reclaim their energy, reinforces the importance of boundaries, and restores a sense of inner peace that may have been absent for years. For the narcissist, it serves as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of their actions in a way that can no longer be ignored. The empath's healing and alignment catalyze the universe's natural law, creating a reality in which peace, clarity, and empowerment replace chaos, manipulation, and emotional exploitation. This process is neither hurried nor forced. It occurs naturally, quietly, and powerfully, demonstrating that the universe has a perfect, unwavering way of ensuring balance. Through this alignment, the empath finally experiences the restoration of their spiritual, emotional, and energetic well-being, while the narcissist faces the undeniable truth of the disruptions they have sown, a truth that cannot be manipulated away, avoided, or ignored. In this sacred process, the empath steps fully into freedom, and the universe quietly unfolds balance with precision, wisdom, and unwavering justice. As the empath continues their journey of healing, one of the most profound and life-changing transformations they experience is the sharpening of spiritual discernment. This is not simply about becoming cautious or suspicious. It is a deep, intuitive ability to perceive truth, to identify hidden motives, and to see beyond the illusions that once clouded their judgment. For years, the empath may have been vulnerable to manipulation because their energy was open, their heart was generous, and their natural instinct to trust and care was exploited by those who thrived on control. Narcissists and other toxic personalities relied on this openness, subtly bending the empath's reality to serve their own needs. But as healing takes hold, the empath begins to reconnect with their own inner guidance, the divine wisdom within them that has always existed but was buried beneath layers of confusion, self-doubt, and emotional drain. This reconnection is both spiritual and practical. The empath begins to sense the truth in subtle ways, through gut feelings, emotional resonance, and a quiet clarity that cuts through deception. No longer are they easily swayed by words that sound comforting but carry hidden agendas, or by gestures that are meant to distract or manipulate. Their perception becomes sharp, almost instinctual, allowing them to navigate relationships, work environments, and social interactions with precision and confidence. This heightened discernment emerges as a natural consequence of the empath reclaiming their energy. As they release the toxic dynamics and emotional labor they once carried for others, their own vibration rises. In spiritual terms, they are no longer tuned into the low-frequency patterns of manipulation and control, which once clouded their ability to see clearly. Instead, they resonate with higher frequencies, energies of truth, clarity, and alignment. This elevated vibration acts as a filter, allowing only authenticity and integrity to enter their consciousness, while deception, hidden agendas, and subtle coercion are immediately recognized and processed intuitively. Every interaction is no longer a mystery. The empath begins to read situations with remarkable clarity, understanding not just the surface behaviors but the underlying intentions behind them. This is the essence of spiritual discernment, the ability to perceive what is real, what is aligned with their truth, and what is designed to manipulate or drain them. Healing is the catalyst for this transformation. As the empath reconnects with themselves, their higher self, and God or their spiritual source, they regain a level of trust in their own judgment that had been eroded over time. Their intuition, once buried under layers of codependency and confusion, resurfaces with clarity and confidence. They no longer feel the need to rationalize or justify the behaviors of others that once caused pain. Instead, they sense the authenticity or toxicity of a situation immediately, often before it is even spoken or acted upon. This is not a skill learned from books or experience alone. It is a spiritual awakening, a realignment with their true nature, and a recognition that the wisdom they need has always existed within them. The empath begins to move through life guided less by fear and doubt and more by divine insight, trusting the subtle signs, feelings, and instincts that point them toward alignment and away from harm. The benefits of this discernment extend into every area of the empath's life. Relationships transform as they no longer tolerate behaviors that compromise their boundaries or drain their energy. Friendships become more meaningful and authentic, attracting people who are aligned with their values and repelling those who are not. Romantic connections take on a higher level of clarity, allowing them to recognize genuine love and compatibility rather than settling for attraction, neediness, or illusion. In professional settings, discernment allows the empath to navigate office politics, manipulation, and competitive dynamics with confidence and integrity. They are able to sense when others are acting from self-interest rather than mutual respect, and their decisions are guided by both intuition and wisdom, ensuring that their energy is invested where it produces growth, success, and alignment. Perhaps most importantly, spiritual discernment shields the empath from falling back into old patterns. They are able to recognize subtle red flags that previously went unnoticed and understand that not every act of charm, apology, or promise should be trusted. The empath no longer doubts themselves when they sense that something is off, because they have learned to honor their inner voice and trust their instincts. This self-trust is critical, as it prevents manipulation, emotional exploitation, and the draining cycles that once defined their relationships with narcissists and other toxic individuals. Over time, this discernment becomes second nature, a quiet, unwavering ability to perceive truth and integrity in a world where deceit often hides behind appearances. The narcissist, on the other hand, becomes increasingly disoriented by this shift. What once allowed them to subtly manipulate and control the empath, the lack of discernment, the open-hearted trust, the willingness to see the best in people regardless of warning signs, no longer works. The empath is no longer an energy source to exploit or a mirror to feed their ego. Their heightened discernment prevents the narcissist from slipping back into the same patterns, leaving them frustrated, powerless, and increasingly irrelevant. The empath's clarity becomes a barrier the narcissist cannot breach, and their ability to sense hidden motives ensures that they maintain control over their own energy and choices. In essence, spiritual discernment is the culmination of the empath's journey towards self-empowerment. It reflects not only their personal growth but also their deep reconnection with their higher self and divine guidance. Through discernment, the empath navigates life with wisdom, confidence, and clarity, no longer vulnerable to manipulation or deception. Their life becomes aligned with truth, their relationships resonate with authenticity, and their energy is fully protected and honored. The empath moves forward with the assurance that every choice they make, every connection they nurture, and every boundary they maintain is guided by inner wisdom, spiritual insight, and an unwavering trust in their own intuitive power. This transformation is not only liberating, it is life-changing. It allows the empath to live fully, authentically, and in alignment with their true purpose, while simultaneously creating an energetic environment where manipulation, deceit, and toxicity can no longer take hold. Spiritual discernment empowers them to reclaim their life, their energy, and their soul, ensuring that they remain connected to truth, guided by wisdom, and protected in all areas of existence. When an empath finally reclaims their freedom, the shift is not only deeply felt within themselves, but it is also sensed on a spiritual level by the narcissist who once relied on them for energy, control, and validation. Narcissists are highly attuned to the energetic states of those they attempt to dominate, and they instinctively feel the moment the empath steps out of their sphere of influence. For years, the narcissist has operated under the assumption that the empath's compassion, sensitivity, and generosity could be molded, manipulated, and used to sustain their ego. Every emotion, every act of patience, every compromise the empath made was absorbed by the narcissist as nourishment, strengthening their sense of control and superiority. But when the empath chooses freedom, their energy shifts dramatically. They no longer feed the narcissist's ego, they no longer respond to the manipulations that once held them captive. This sudden withdrawal of energy, love, and attention is felt by the narcissist as a profound loss, one that touches them not just emotionally, but spiritually. It is as if the narcissist's sense of entitlement to another person's soul has been challenged, and this triggers a deep, instinctive sense of defeat. This feeling of defeat manifests in multiple ways. On an emotional level, narcissists often experience intense jealousy. They watch, from a distance or through whatever means they can monitor, as the empath begins to thrive independently, radiate stability, and form relationships that nurture rather than drain. The narcissist may try to rationalize the empath's freedom as temporary, or convince themselves that the empath will eventually return, but beneath the rationalizations, there is an undeniable sense of inadequacy. For the first time, the narcissist sees that their charm, manipulation, and control are no longer effective. The tools they relied on for so long have lost their power, leaving the narcissist exposed to the reality that they cannot regain the energy, loyalty, or devotion they once took for granted. This triggers anxiety, which can be subtle at first, like a persistent unease or nagging worry, but over time it grows more pronounced. The narcissist becomes obsessed with the empath's life, tracking their progress, scrutinizing their choices, and comparing their own perceived success to the freedom and peace the empath now enjoys. Spiritually, this experience is even more intense. Narcissists exist in a constant state of energetic dependence on others. Their identity and sense of power are constructed from external validation. When an empath withdraws their energy, they strike at the core of the narcissist's spiritual foundation. The narcissist feels a void, a loss of control, and a confrontation with the truth that they were never truly independent in their power. It was borrowed from the empath all along. This realization can be terrifying because it exposes the narcissist's vulnerability in a way they are unaccustomed to confronting. Their usual defenses, such as charm, intimidation, or manipulation, no longer shield them from the spiritual reality of the empath's autonomy. They experience the empath's freedom as a direct challenge to their ego and their identity, and the sense of personal defeat is amplified by the narcissist's inability to access or influence the empath's energy in any meaningful way. This perceived defeat often triggers obsessive thoughts, as the narcissist struggles to understand why the empath can no longer be controlled. They may ruminate endlessly over past interactions, dissecting every word, gesture, and decision to uncover how the empath escaped their influence. They may attempt to strategize ways to regain control, often underestimating the strength and boundaries the empath has now established. But no tactic can reach the empath in the same way again. The empath's freedom acts as an energetic firewall, protecting them from further manipulation and ensuring that the narcissist's attempts at influence are futile. This failure is experienced by the narcissist as an existential blow. The empath they once felt entitled to is no longer available to feed their ego, and no amount of coercion, charm, or persuasion can change that reality. Meanwhile, the empath experiences a completely different reality. Their freedom is not a weapon. It is a restoration of self, energy, and spiritual alignment. They move through life guided by intuition, clarity, and inner peace, no longer tethered to the emotional turbulence of the narcissist. Every step they take, every boundary they maintain, and every decision they make reinforces their independence and demonstrates their power to live in alignment with their soul's purpose. The narcissist senses this not as empowerment but as a loss, because they are inherently dependent on the energy of others to sustain themselves. What the empath experiences as liberation, the narcissist experiences as defeat, and this juxtaposition underscores the deep spiritual divide between those who manipulate and those who have reclaimed sovereignty over their own lives. This shift also serves as a crucial teaching moment for both parties. For the narcissist, it exposes the limitations of control, the fragility of ego built on external validation, and the consequences of relying on others to sustain their sense of self. For the empath, it reinforces the profound power of reclaiming energy, establishing boundaries, and living authentically. The empath's freedom is a living testament to the possibility of overcoming manipulation, transcending control, and reconnecting with one's higher self. It demonstrates that personal liberation is not only possible but transformative, radiating outward to influence every area of life in alignment with truth, clarity, and spiritual growth. Ultimately, the narcissist's experience of the empath's freedom as a personal defeat highlights the profound energetic consequences of reclaiming sovereignty. The empath is no longer a source of emotional or spiritual nourishment for someone who thrived on control. They are a fully aligned, independent, and empowered being whose energy cannot be accessed without consent. This realization is a turning point for the narcissist, a moment when they confront the truth of their dependence, the limits of their power, and the reality that the empath's life no longer revolves around their ego. Meanwhile, the empath continues to move forward, liberated, whole, and spiritually sovereign, embodying the very freedom that the narcissist can only witness and feel as a personal defeat, a silent yet undeniable acknowledgement that the era of manipulation has ended and that the empath's life is now theirs alone to live fully and authentically.